her hair was not covered, she was wearing pants. And I said, Al tiri oti kacha. I didn't think that you're not religious. Meaning, don't judge me. By thinking that I'm judging you, you're judging me. I never thought, I don't consider you to be, why would I consider anyone who's in the kosher supermarket and pays more for kosher products to be not a So that's a very common thing. We label people based on their behavior and mostly based on their appearance. So I wanted to touch this subject, and we made some copies of halachic response that I'm going to. Some is in Hebrew, so those of you who are proficient Hebrew can do that. Just pass them around. I guess this is the time to do that, right? Rabbi, with the sources, and I'll just give a brief introduction on that specific question, and then go to the actual teshuvot, halachic response and discussion, to see maybe a different approach in the Sephardic world. So I hear from a lot of my friends when we discuss denominations in the Ashkenazi and Sephardic world that the Sephardim never had the phenomenon of reform or conservative because they were not exposed to the Enlightenment. And in the sense they're right, because the reform is partially a product of the Enlightenment, the emancipation that took place in Europe. But on the other hand, it is incorrect because the Sephardic world went through the period of exposure to Enlightenment much earlier than the Ashkenazi world, or even in a time where we could say the Ashkenazi world didn't exist yet. And that is during the rise of Islam in around the 8th century, with the enlightened rules of Islam in the Abbasid and the Umayyad Empire. And later on, during the Golden Age in Spain. There are books that people could refer to: Aristotle's Children, The Ornament of the World, God's Crucible, and other works like that describe what happened during the early years of Islam. But at that period, it was the Islamic world which maintained the flame of the Greek philosopher and scientist. Most Greek works were preserved through the Arabic translation done by Jewish and Muslim scholars into Arabic, and later on was picked up in the Renaissance by Italian scholars. That is one point, that Sephardim were already exposed and lived within this world. And when you look at the literature of the Geonim of Bavel, who reigned more or less between the 7th, 8th century to the 11th century, you see that they encouraged the learn and study of different fields of science, mathematics, astronomy, language, rhetorics. It was all part also later on of the curriculum of the Sephardic yeshivot. So there was this exposure. The other element is the reaction of the Jewish communities to the world around them. And that is not something that we could describe as choice, but rather it was a necessity, it was a product of the times. And that is, the Jewish communities who lived under Islam did not feel as persecuted and alienated as the Jewish communities living under Christianity. I know that to say that today sounds crazy, because we expect most people, when you walk in the street and see someone with a burqa or hijab or something like that, we automatically see them under there, with a machine gun or an explosive belt or something like that. I wrote a column a couple of years ago for the Jewish Journal of LA called "Reopening the Bridge with Islam." The editor retitled it "Jew of Islam," which is going to be very popular in different circles. But when you look at it historically, you realize that the community, the Ashkenazi community, was formed in Germany in the context of German Catholicism, under the church, who demonized the Jews and who saw the Jews as the killers of God. And one of the scholars, when he refers to this question as the concept of the myth of the deicide, the Jews as the killers of God, explains that there's an essential difference between this myth and other myths. Because all myths sort of replicate something that happened in ancient times. But when you think about Greek mythology, Babylonian mythology, and even certain myths that are part of the biblical mythology, not mythology, but a myth, in the sense of a story that happened in antiquity and now is being replayed in our time, the myth of the killing of God was a living myth, because the early Christians lived side by side with the Jews that they thought were the killers of God. So in each generation, they would tell their children, those you see around you, the Jews around you, are their direct descendants. So there was very deep animosity between the church and the Jews. There was a complex of inferiority for Jews living in Germany, when even though they came as privileged citizens under the auspices of the bishops and the princes of different cities, but when they walked around town and they saw the depictions on the walls of the churches of Judea Capta, the Jewish people as captive under the heel of the church, of the ecclesia, and feeling that God abandoned them, and those of them who were scholars and were in touch with Christian scholars, which is something that happened throughout the Middle Ages, knew that there was a concept called the Augustine Compromise, that St. Augustine explained that all the biblical prophecies that refer to Am Yisrael that were a problem for Christian theologians. How do we explain all those biblical prophecies talking about Am Yisrael as the chosen people? And the solution was that we as Am Yisrael are not Israel anymore. We are only carnal Israel, Israel in the flesh, whereas the church is Verus Israel, true Israel. So to feel that, to know that you're under the heel of the church, to know that they hate you as the killer of God, and to also, one last element, to know that you are living in an idolatrous environment, because Jews consider Christians to be pagans, whereas they did not consider Muslim to be pagans. So all these led to the decision of communities deliberately to isolate themselves from the surrounding world, and to put themselves in the ghetto, even before there was a ghetto, in a spiritual or and theological ghetto. Whereas for example, in Spain, the leaders of the community took a more proactive approach, and what they did when they were threatened by the outside culture was to actually move into the foreign territory, adopt whatever they had to offer, and convert it into their own culture. Sort of an immunization process. So if we take the analogy of immunization, when someone who was afraid of contracting diseases would shut himself in a protective bubble, when he walks out, he doesn't have the natural immunization. So what the Sephardim did, the example that I want to mention is Sephardic poetry. We all use in our high holidays tefillot Sephardic poetry. Even Ashkenazim, there are some pieces of poetry that made their way in. Definitely, if you like Hebrew and you learn in the modern school, Hebrew Academy or Flatbush or Ramaz, one of these, you've learned. All of us know Yehuda Levi, Rabbi Shlomo ben Gabirol, Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid. For some Israelis, those are streets in Tel Aviv. They are fun streets, and Ben Gabirol, corner of Alcalá, yeah, great. It's a good pub over there. But they also wrote great poetry. So how did this poetry come about? Where did it come from? Where did it come from? It's an interesting story. The Muslim world was very fond of Arabic. And for a long time, there was prohibition of translating the Quran to another language, because they believed this is the pure language and the only language in which the Quran can be understood. And as the Muslim scholars embarked on writing poetry, they also said that the only language in the world in which you could write poetry, or beautiful poetry, is Arabic. Now, the Jewish community was, in a way, threatened by this statement, because now you're being told there's a superior culture. So one way to react would be, okay, from now on, no poetry. You're not allowed to read poetry. And religious regimes and other regimes around the world did that. They squashed literature, poetry, creativity, whether the Soviet Union or, in some places in Bnei Brak, and in Lakewood. I'm not saying it as criticism, Chas v'shalom. My kids live in Lakewood, but no, really. I pay a lot of money for black hats. But this is the mentality. The culture is a threat, so we better shut ourselves in and protect ourselves, because we don't want to be tempted by it. We don't want to feel that if my kid reads poetry and he sees, wow, this is really amazing, I want to read that. The Bible is not enough for me. The Talmud is not enough for me. That would be one reaction. But the reaction of the Jewish Spanish scholars, which brought about the golden age in Spain, was, you know what? We're going to appropriate your culture and show you that we're better than you. And that's what they did. Some say that they were not better. It's a debate between modern scholars of poetry, between Mirsky and Bialik and others, but I think they did quite a good job. They created beautiful poetry, but they also taught their followers that you could deal with alien culture, that not everything is evil, and you take whatever is good, you eschew whatever is not for you. And I think that became later on, we could say, the paradigm for the Sephardic world, which is inclusiveness instead of exclusiveness or exclusivity. So now I'm not saying that this paradigm fits every Sephardic community in any given period of time in every place. There was a variety, just like the Rabbi said, "Geshem sheparzufehem shonim ze mizeh, dorotehem shonim zo mizo." They live in different places. There are different approaches. One example that I like to cite, when people say, they identify Sephardi with lenient, it's not exactly that. It's a different understanding of halacha and environment. So one example is a great scholar and rabbi from Lakewood, New Jersey, who was at a certain point, people thought he's going to be the Rosh Yeshiva of Beis Medrash Gova in Lakewood, Rabbi Ovadia. And he has a kashrut list, kashrut.org. I'm not promoting it, but you can check it if you want for halachic questions. It's very interesting, where he says that there are certain products you could eat even though they have the supervision seal, if they're still kosher, and others that you could eat without the supervision. Someone asked him this question: what about popcorn that is being sold at a movie theater, for example? So he says the popcorn is kosher. So we say, yay, a Sephardic rabbi is lenient. But then he says, but what are you doing at the movies? So it's not that simple. It's not about being lenient or strict. It's a whole comprehensive worldview. I came to learning and analyzing and understanding what I saw because I had the personal example, the role model of my grandfather, who learned from his great-grandfather and generations of rabbi before him. So now, let's get to the text, and I want to read to you two very interesting teshuvot. One comes from one of my personal heroes, Rabbi Yosef Meshash, who was born in Meknes in 1892, lived in Morocco most of his life. You have it in the Sephardic Paradox, and also in Hebrew. It's the one that says on top, "What's up, Michtavim?" Rabbi Meshash was born in Meknes. He was a prolific writer, and also someone who corresponded with rabbis from all over the world, including Avraham Yitzchak Cohen Cook in Eretz Israel, rabbis in Poland, in Hungary, all over the world, and was well versed in history, in Hebrew language, and other fields of science. He served for a short while as rabbi in Tlemcen, Algeria, which at a certain point in the 1500s was one of the main destinations of the exiles from Spain. Actually, from the 1300s, with the first expulsion from Palma de Mallorca and other places, they arrived in Tlemcen in Algeria. And later on, in the last couple of years, 7 or 8 years of his life, he was the chief rabbi of Haifa. This is the book, 24, it's called Otzar HaMichtavim. And if you want to see it later, I'll show you. Just so you know, it's taken from a real book. It's because whatever is in a book is sort of It's already written. It's there. So here's the question. The rabbi was asked by a young man who married a woman with her hair covered, meaning that was understood that she's going to cover her hair. That was the norm. They lived in a small city in a county named Uzda, not far from Casablanca. But after a couple of years, this man, or the following year, he was offered a job in Casablanca. Casablanca, a major city, already cosmopolitan at the time, in the 1950s. And the husband moved there, started getting acclimated, and after a while, he sends his wife a letter, says, it's all set, we're ready, you can come now. She says, no problem, and no scarf, or head cover of any sort. If I go there, she says, in the Hebrew, you see, keminhag hamakom ve'azman. Makom ve'zman. She says, what is good for our little village is not good for Casablanca, and what was good for the previous century is not good for our time. Hamakom ve'azman, this is what she cares about. And in the Hebrew it says, Uchodo lo ratza, but the husband refused. It's impossible. You know, he married a religious woman, just like we said before. He married a datiya, not a hiloniya. He doesn't want that. So they keep corresponding, and this thing drags out, and he suffered physical pain. I don't know exactly what the rabbi refers to. Maybe he had to travel back and forth, and it was really taxing on him as he had to work in Casablanca. Finally, he accepted. He caved in. He said, okay, you could come like that. Problem? In-laws. Okay. So now the in-laws weigh in and say, no way. She cannot walk around with her hair uncovered. Shame to the family, you know, come with all the excuses. We just know that the in-laws don't like the daughter-in-law and they want to do whatever they can to make her life miserable. But this is what they did. They just got in between their son and his wife. Everybody sort of like biblical, poetical Hebrew in his teshuvot. And the poor man is like the fork in the road, and he has to take it as yoga parents. But so he's now there. Ben Abinayim. What am I going to do? Do I listen to my wife, and I lose my parents' support and approval, or do I go with my parents and then maybe we'll have to even get divorced? So the request was this: לחוות דעתי להמציא לו צד היתר בעניין זה להראותו להוריו. He turned to the rabbi for a specific purpose. I want you to show them that it's okay. I'm not asking you for your opinion. Tell me how it's okay. I'm sure rabbis, you got right questions like that? Right. Right. I get this. People call it, I called you because I think you will say it's okay. But why? He wants to show it to his parents. להשקיט המיית לבבם הסוער ולשפוט שלום בין כל המשפחה. The purpose is to have peace and harmony. He already accepted. For him, it's fine. He wants to live with his wife. He loves her. He respects her. He doesn't think that she's less religious because of that. But he wants to show his parents, just to, here's the paper. It's okay. The rabbi said it's okay. So, the rabbi's answers. He says, that was a given that here in Meknes or in the main cities of Morocco, that was the hazakah. That was the tradition. There was no question that a woman covers her hair. But that was terem bo hatzarfatim, before the French took over Morocco. But a short while after they came, the women changed their ways. And there was mayhem. The rabbis were upset. They were screaming. They were yelling, fire and brimstone. That's from the It's from the description of the plague of hail. So hail stopped. No more scary noises. Why? Says the rebuke did not help. Whether you come with nice words or with fire and brimstone, it didn't work. כי אין חזק כאישה, אמרו הקדמונים. Nothing is stronger than a woman, said the ancients. I don't think that there were ancients like that. I think he made them up, but it's okay. But anyway, אין חזק כאישה. He says, you can't, if she decided that's what she wants to do, nothing you can do. He says, but now they all do that. The only women who cover their hair are older women. And I have photos to prove that. From my great-grandmother. And when she was younger, she didn't cover her hair. And when she was in her 80s, she has, you would think she's Muslim. She has like, or a nun. She has this, she has something here, completely covered. Earlier on, there was no head covering. So now he says, okay, so we have a historical fact that there was a custom in Morocco and it was changed because of the French. But then he says, in the 1920s, he served in Tlemcen in Algeria as a rabbi. And then he saw that it is a common thing for women not to cover their hair. None of them. As a matter of fact, this was already attested to by Maharam al-Ashkar, Rabbi Moshe al-Ash'ar, who came from Spain in the 1390s, 500 years almost before Rabbi Mishash, and he was surprised to see that the women who live among the Muslims do not cover their hair, and the women who came from Christian Spain do cover their hair. The opposite of what we would have thought as influence of culture. And the reason is that it was not about religion in Europe as much, it was about fashion. And he ended up saying, I think that it's okay even for the Spanish women to change their custom and go with uncovered hair because they're never going to go back to Spain. Amazing statement. It's those of you who want to check out this teshuvah, it's chapter 35 of his Shalot Teshuvot. Actually, it's in the third paragraph in the next column, so it's written there. I just didn't translate it. So now here is a statement that I think is a key to understanding the Sephardic ideology, which again I said, not practiced by all, and practiced also by many Ashkenazi rabbis in the ancient past, before the advance of Reform and Conservative Judaism, like Baalei Tosafot. That was their approach, to try to find practical solution and to make Judaism livable. So he says this. It's in the second paragraph in Hebrew, about 10 lines from the bottom of the paragraph. נתתי ליבי ללמד עליהם זכות, כי אי אפשר להעלות עליו ולהחזיר הדבר כמאז. I came with the approach, that's 30 years ago already, in the 1920s, I said I must find a way to understand why what they're doing is permissible. I cannot label them Hiloni. I cannot label them non-observant. And he says, אי אפשר להעלות על הלב להחזיר הדבר כמאז. What do you want to do? You want to bring back the past? Impossible. That's because of his historical, which I mentioned before, historical perception. Extremely important to understand history. He says, כי הדבר הולך ומתפתח עם התפתחות הזמן בכל דבר. Just as we move forward, modernity, progress in every other field, this also is progress. So we cannot go back. If you have any doubts, by the way, that if he was it doesn't look like any, right? Just as you can see, traditional Orthodox, if you could say that, Orthodox Sephardic. Okay. So he says it keeps evolving, it keeps moving forward. We can't bring it back. He says I have to go. He says so. He looked at the poskim. He looks at the books as we always do. We look for precedents. All the precedents from the previous generations were against it. They all say it's forbidden. So he says I have to go back even further. I want to go all the way back to the Talmud to dismiss the precedent, to dismiss the discussion, the discourse that happened at the time of the Haronim, because it says something is happening that maybe we're not paying attention to. כי באמת קשה לנשים ולבעליהם לעבור על מצוות עשה שהזמן גרמה. It says like that it's unacceptable to say that they're sinners. I must say that what they're doing is correct. Let me see if I can do that. He goes through all, which I didn't put here all his sources and analysis, But he eventually comes to the conclusion that hair covering for women is all based on minhag, on custom. Whatever is fashionable, whatever is considered by environment to be by society to be modesty, this is what women did. And he says, and this is the third paragraph in the English, and the first in the left column in the Hebrew. It's all based on minhag. It was considered modesty at a certain time. You know, if you look at American ads from the 1920s, for a woman to show her ankle was considered immodest. That times they are changing. So and a woman who wouldn't do that would be considered immodest. So I always hear the argument when I bring this up, whether it's about men or women, say, oh, so if someone decides not to wear clothes at all, it would be okay? The answer is nobody does that. Most people don't do that. We have a certain natural balance to decide what's right and what's not right. In the general environment, yes, there are certain places they might do that, but general society had not turned back into cavemen or anything like that. So this is what his conclusion is after he shows that based on the sources, he analyzes the Talmudic sources, biblical sources, Mishnaic sources, and he says there's no solid proof to say that women are obligated by biblical law or even by rabbinical law. It's not saying the Doraita, even by the Rabbanan, they're not obligated. Now that all women agree that for them covering the head does not connote modesty or holiness, אין בכיסוי הראש שום צניעות, רק צביעות. A little extreme here. He says, wordplay, the word tzniut with nun is modesty, tzviut with bet is hypocrisy. He's not saying, God forbid, that all women who cover their hair are hypocritical, but rather says, if that's the only thing that shows that you're religious, that's hypocrisy. And we know of people like that, men and women who convey religiosity by the dress code, but they're not, as they say in Hebrew, etocham kevaram. They're really hypocrites. We have enough of that. So, and if anyone would ask the question, so what does your wife do, Rabbi? What do you think my wife does? She covers her hair. Yeah, of course. And do you think I tried to tell her not to? I did. Did I succeed? Of course not. Why? Because as the Rabbi said, En hazak chaisha avua kadmoni. But I'm not against it. I said, okay, I'm just telling you that it's okay. He says, no, this is what I do, and don't tell me. Anyway, but this is interesting because the point is the approach and the process, not the conclusion as much as the process. The process is this: we have a problem. The situation as it is cannot continue. We must find a solution, and we must find a solution that will not be one-sided. We can't come with a solution saying you must cover your hair, do teshuvah, repent now, or you will burn in Gehenna. This is not going to work. He knows that. So let's find a solution. This is one example. We have time, right, to briefly go for another example, Rabbi? Yes, 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah, it's good that you have a watch over there.
We have cloths on every wall.
Every wall. Yeah. Yeah. The rule of thumb, by the way, yeah. This is a rule. If the clock is there, it means that the cantor should be brief, but the rabbi can talk as much as he wants. If it's over there, the rabbi can talk, but maybe it's the opposite. But when you have here and there, everybody should. Okay, so I'm good with that. So this teshuvah, the other side, is from Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Toledano, who was born in Tiberias in 1880, passed away in Yerushalayim in the 1960s. He signed on the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, even though he signed it on Friday. Everybody else signed on Shabbat. And he came from a long lineage of rabbis who moved from Morocco to Israel, and for many years he served as a rabbi in Alexandria, in Cairo, and also in Tangier, in Morocco, in Spanish Morocco. So this question came to him when he was in Morocco. Dayanu Moreh Tzedek Baruch Tancher. So he lives in Tangiers, and okay, I'll go briefly to the question because we have 10 minutes. The question was as follows. A man from Tangiers who lived in Spain most of the year and had a factory, lived there with his family, needed to eat meat, but there was no kosher meat available, which is still a problem. I mean, last time I checked, was when I was about to be there in Barcelona, so it was 20 years ago, they still had a problem. They had to import from France. But this in the 1930s, during the Civil War, it was not an easy thing to get meat in Spain. The man wants to know if he could go to the local shohet and learn how to slaughter chicken. He doesn't want to be pretentious and think that he could shecht animals, but at least chicken so he could have food. So the shohet didn't feel comfortable because the man was not very knowledgeable, and he said, there are five main elements that a shohet must know: how to hold the knife, which vein to cut first. I won't talk too much about that. I was vegetarian for a while, the shohet didn't feel comfortable. He turned to Rabbi Toledano. Is it okay? Rabbi Toledano says this: "Yeshavti lo, kivan שהסוחר הנזכר לא יוכל להישאר זמן רב בלי אכילת בשר." There were no soy burgers at the time, or Whole Foods, or Trader Joe's. So he's not going to survive without meat. What is he going to eat? He needs meat in his diet. מוטב שיאכל שחיטות ולא יאכל תמותות. It's better for him to do his own shechita, even if once in a while maybe it wouldn't be perfect, than ending up buying non-kosher meat. And he says, teach him the halachot, teach him the laws of shechita in Spanish, and give him a diploma that says you could do shechita for you and your family, and if you have guests also for them, but don't take it beyond that. Don't be commercial, don't do shechita for other people. And he quotes a lot of sources where he could support that argument. In Italy, by the way, we have documents from medieval times in Italy where women also had a semicha for shechita. Women did that. It says anyway, bechol zot, in the Hebrew it's after the crossover words. Bechol zot lo samachti al da'ati bazeh. He didn't want to rely. He wanted someone else to support him, and he wrote a letter to Rabbi Rafael Anukawa, who was the chief rabbi of Morocco and the Maghreb, which is the North Africa. And he said, "Well, what do you think? Is it okay for that man to do that?" The Rabbi Anukawa answered, he says, "You don't need to ask me for that. You're knowledgeable enough, and of course it is okay because you are saving that man from trouble, either the trouble of not eating meat at all or ending up eating non-kosher meat." But he said, even more so. He says, this is not even a question. To slaughter chicken, not even a question. He said, I'll give you something better. He says, my father-in-law, Rabbi Sachar Asaraf, moved from Morocco to Israel in 1880. Before he moved, he got a question from the Moroccan community in Para, in Brazil. It was a Moroccan community in Para that I brought into English, moved there in around 1810, because of the rubber industry, the caoutchouc industry. There are still Jewish life in the Amazon basin till today. Native Indian American theirs and Moroccan blood mixed. The names like Ben Zaken and others, they're a very interesting story. Anyway, they wanted to know how can they get kosher meat. Now, Para is about 2,000 miles from Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro. There's no way they're going to get kosher meat from there, definitely not in 1810, and they're not going to get a shohet. All the people who lived in this community were hard workers. They cannot support a shohet or rabbi or anything like that. What are they going to do? I have the feeling that if this question was directed at one of the major kashrut organizations today, the answer would be tough luck. You're in the Amazon basin. There are a lot of fruits there. Enjoy. Bananas, I don't know what it is. Mango, there are a lot of fruits that you don't even know how to pronounce their name or eat them. But no meat for you. But that was not the answer of Rabbi Asaraf. He said, okay, we need a knowledgeable man to do shechita and a not so knowledgeable man to supervise him. So take the most knowledgeable man that you know. Someone who has basic knowledge, who could, maybe he went to a class from us or something like that. Who Googled, what does halakha say about something? No, he says basic knowledge. Take the most knowledgeable man you have, and I'll send him a letter explaining. I think I already sent the letter he gave them the basics of shehita. This is what you do. Take another man who's not as knowledgeable, enough if he knows to read some tehillim and some prayers, and he will be the supervisor. And he will now let the first man, the scholar, let him sharpen a knife real well and make sure that it's sharp with no blemishes, and let the supervisor make sure that it's sharp, and then watch over him when he does shehita. Then let them check the inner organs of the animal and see that there are no major problems that are evident, and then they could eat. I read this Teshuvah and I was truly amazed. I mean, you read Yom HaGadol. Yom HaGadol is available online as well as Otzar HaMichtavim at HebrewBooks.org, which is an amazing website that has over 50,000 Jewish books available for reading and printing. HebrewBooks.org, in case, I'm sure you all know, but just in case. So, Yom HaGadol, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Toledano, who ended up being the first minister of religious affairs in the state of Israel, quoting Rabbi Yisachar Asaraf, what they had is a deep understanding of the people who stand in front of them. He knew that you cannot tell them don't eat meat, because eventually they will need it. If you tell them we need you to stay within the fold and don't move one step outside, we're going to lose them eventually. Going back to Germany and the beginning of the Reform movement is exactly what happened. One of the elements where when people came to the rabbis and said, we would like to have a sermon in German. No way. We think that maybe we shouldn't walk with the kippah outside. No way. Later on in Hungary, they came to the Hatam Sofer. We think that the teva should not be here. The Hazan stands here in your show. Okay. It's acceptable. People said, we can't hear the Hazan. We want to do like the Sephardim, move the teva to the middle. No, we can't do that. What happened as a result, that everyone who wanted to do something a little differently, and the rabbi were not open to hear their needs, and to accommodate them, and to include them, were pushed outside the wall. Another one goes outside, and another one, and then all the ostracized and rejects stand there, and they look at each other and they say, you know what? We're a community. I don't say we're a boss. But if you're not accepted at a certain place, eventually you're going to form your own group, and this is what happened. The Sephardic rabbis were able for a while to hold back because they were more inclusive. They realized that some people go to watch the soccer game on Shabbat, and then they come over. First they go to shul, and then they go for the soccer game. Well, my father, for example, wouldn't go to watch the soccer game, but would always stop by the young guys who listen to the radio and would check Betar Yerushalayim. But they had this. It's not all or nothing. We accommodate people, and it's not a compromise of halakha. We're not losing anything. It's not being lenient and saying, oh, you're just discarding halakha. No, we are upkeeping halakha, because the slippery slope goes both ways. If you're too lenient, you could lose people, but also if you're strict, you lose them in a different way. So I just wanted to show that. I think that's the Sephardic paradox. It does work with the name. And now we have a panel discussion. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Rabbi.
It's a beautiful song. It comes from the 40th chapter, I think the 40th chapter of Yeshayahu. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. Comfort, comfort my people. There's lots of ways to read the pasuk, but I think one of the ways is that we imagine Hashem, God reaching out to us and saying it's our job to comfort God's people. Yes. And hearing your Torah and being in a room like this with so many different people from so many different places, I feel like we're accomplishing it. So I have no feeling in my toes anymore. I'm freezing. I don't know about you. It's my own shul, and I wear sweaters, but it doesn't help. But maybe we can just stand so we get a little blood to our toes, and let's sing together. Because I know you have the best voice, Sephardi. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And let's just sing one moment, and then we'll bring the panel. This gives you a second to stretch. If you need to use a restroom, it's out this door or out that door right behind this wall. But this is the song. Sing with me for a moment, just so we can be together. Nachamu, nachamu, ami, yom Elohechem. Nachamu, nachamu, ami, yom Elohechem. Aidaveru alev Yerushalayim, vekiru eilev. Daveru alev Yerushalayim, vekiru eilecha. V'nachamu, nachamu, ami, yom Elohechem. Nachamu, nachamu, ami, yom Elohechem. Ididai, na, 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 na. Ai, na, 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 na. Ai, na, 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 na. Ai, na, 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 na. Just gonna pull a table up front, stretch your legs a little extra.